bridge collapses are horrific. They happen without warning and normally when loaded heavy with transport. A pandemic is also horrible. It robs an entire planet of its freedom and fills it with fear. Like a bridge collapse, by the time you have figured out what's going on, it's already too late. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History from the Weather Network in Canada. When both of these two scenarios play out together, however, guess what? It dramatically reduces the potential collateral damage. I'll explain right now on This Day in Weather History. A bridge on a normally busy provincial road in northern Italy collapsed on April 8th of 2020. However, with virtually no traffic anywhere because of the crippling restrictions brought on because of the coronavirus lockdown, there were just two people who suffered minor injuries. It occurred at close to 10:30 in their morning, so normally this would have been mass chaos, and the loss of life could have been and likely would have been staggering. Now, this was a 260-meter bridge on a road near the town of Aula, roughly midway between Genoa and Florence. Helicopter surveillance views of the area showed where sections of the bridge crossing the river Magra had fallen into the water, buckling a stretch of the road behind it. And this route was now completely finished. The COVID-19 protocol lockdown to halt the spread of the surging coronavirus meant that regular, heavy, midweek traffic that might normally have been using this bridge was simply not there. And as a result, there were only two delivery trucks that were involved, and their respective drivers were taken to hospital with luckily only minor injuries. But this opened a big old can of worms. It highlighted a bigger and more pressing issue: the continuing poor state of repair of Italy's road network. Only 2 years prior, in 2018, there had been another collapse in the port city of Genoa that killed 43 people. The infrastructure of this bridge had undergone periodic safety controls since 2019, that said from the group ENAS, who had also stated that they had formed an investigation team to get to the bottom of why this collapse happened here in 2020. I don't know, but it might have had something to do with the fact that it was, at the time, a 111-year-old bridge in a country that has been ground zero for 2 world wars and countless other major skirmishes during and since. More on that after this. Welcome to year 2 of this podcast. Right now, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider. But there's also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective. But oftentimes, they will include visuals from that day's event, from when it happened, in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. The 111-year-old bridge was located in central Italy, and the original warnings about the stability of this bridge dated back 7 years to 2013. Then, in November of 2019, a crack on the road pavement was reported by bridge users after heavy rainfall. From these reports, ENAS carried out an inspection of the bridge, but strangely found nothing wrong that would require emergency repairs. So they just patched it up with a fresh coat of asphalt. Still today, the root cause of the bridge collapse is unknown, but it is suspected that a smaller unknown event may have triggered the more significant one, which weakened the structural integrity of the bridge and its support. This was certainly not an isolated incident either. The municipality of Aula and local inhabitants had also previously brought into question the safety of the bridge. They actually sent a letter in August of 2019 to Vincenzo Marzi, who at the time was the head of ENAS Department for Tuscany. All he replied with was the following, quote, "The viaduct for the moment does not present criticalities such as to compromise its static functionality." There's a lot of syllables there. But then, as I mentioned earlier, this was before the discovery of that crack in the asphalt of the road in November of 2019 that they patched. What a complete cluster of errors. So, what do you think will happen to a bridge over a century old in a country still stuck between modern and ancient times? Italy needs to advance to keep up with the changing world, but it cannot let go of its culturally rich past, because without that, our civilization loses track of our roots and who we are as a species. It's a tough spot to be in for sure. Plus, tourism is everything to this country, so you cannot lose sight of the past. Staying in the past, the bridge was badly damaged in the spring of 1945 at the end of World War II by mines that were set by the retreating German troops. It was repaired between 1945 and 49 with improvements made. The upper parts of the bridge and its deck were reconstructed, retaining the original lower parts of the bridge, but in this process, it was fortified for greater loads required by a then more modern and heavier traffic. Then, on this fateful day, it all came down. But luckily with only 2 people on it. This day in weather history. Tomorrow is April 9th, and we're going back into another of my favorite topics on Earth. The irony here is that it's a story about space travel. On April 9th of 1959, NASA introduced to the world America's first astronauts. Now, they planned to begin manned orbital flights in 1961. You see, the Reds had already launched Sputnik successfully, so the Stars and Stripes needed to jump into the race by being the first to send humans into at least near-Earth orbit. And how this played out is tomorrow, on this day in weather history with me, your host, Chris May.